Hi there, everybody, and thank you very much for attending. As I think next door, he said he was the last person between you and a cocktail. I think that's me, and by the way, I am buying. So, listen, we over the last couple of days, we've been talking a lot about research assessment, impact, data, dashboards, reporting, analytics, schemas, outcomes, generative AI. However, what we do know about our research climate, but what we have not really been talking about is about our research climate and our research cultures. Just by way of background, I'm Andrew Rosen. I'm the CEO of Interfolio. We were recently acquired about a little over a year and a half ago by Elsevier. We focus on faculty and academic information systems. A large part of our platform revolves around qualitative academic evaluation and qualitative research evaluation, very similar to how we started these couple of days with Quora. So just a quick question as we start. How many of you track data related to your research cultures? Okay, when I say that, the attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, like within the research workplace. Anybody collect any of this data? Demographics, diversity, terminal year to PhD, discipline coverage. Okay, we got one. So listen, I really do get it. Running a research organization or being a research leader in an institution, especially in large institutions, is hard. We're advancing our research performance. We are always focusing on our global reputation, diversifying funding streams, fulfilling funder compliance and governmental compliance areas. But the question about supporting thriving research cultures very often falls to the side. But very often, the quality of our research really falls on the shoulders of our research culture. So what is research culture? I alluded to it a little bit before, but really it comes down to the norms of our research communities, the behaviors, values, expectations, and attitudes and norms of our research communities. But really importantly, and it's great to point out, that it specifically calls out, the Royal Society's definition specifically calls out researcher career pathways. And if you think about it, what happens when our researchers don't believe that they have sustainable career pathways? What happens to the quality of the research? And what you'll find, and we'll talk a little bit about later, is whether we can sustain quality research if we don't have strong research cultures. So, and the other reason I will point out that it matters, and continuing on from the definition, is that it affects recruiting, it affects our ability to construct successful teams, keeping and maintaining our top talent that are drawn to successful environments that provide a lot of opportunities. And lastly, like I said before, it can ultimately and significantly affect research quality. So, you know, this was based on a Danish study, but what's interesting is that if we look back over the last 40 years, the research environment has clearly changed. If you think about it, international collaboration and competition has increased dramatically. The use of and focus on quality measures, wow, we have a lot of quality measures these days. A lot of people think in terms of KPIs, and it's really interesting in some of the reports that you think about, young early career researchers are thinking more about KPIs than they are on the quality of their research. They're feeling that pressure. And then when you think about it, the pace of dissemination of scientific knowledge has increased dramatically. So if you think about the pace at which we were doubling medical knowledge 40 years ago, we've probably exponentially increased that today. So the academy has dramatically changed. And so the question is are we bypassing it with on the culture side? So in 2020, there was a study performed, and I don't know, has anybody seen the Wellcome Foundation's survey on research cultures? It was, I would say it's almost a wake-up call, staggering. If you look at this chart, so we're looking at early, entry level, early stage, mid stage, and late stage. And early stage researchers, if you think about it, not even a third believe there's longevity in a career in research, that they feel secure in pursuing a career in research, and that they're satisfied with their career prospects within research. That's dramatic. That's staggering. And then if you actually look at the left-hand side, not the latter stage researchers, left-hand side, nobody breaks 50%. That's pretty crazy. Okay? And that's the world that we live in. So, yeah, what we're finding in this is that there's a discrepancy, obviously, between entry to early stage. It's pretty dramatic. But then if you look from early to latter stage, like, what a disconnect. So when you start thinking about some of the demographic factors, terminal year from PhD, do we even think of our researchers in that mindset? Where are they? In the same study, I believe it was something like 50% of researchers, actually this is an Australian study that we'll see in a moment, but 50% of early stage researchers believe that they were not being mentored appropriately, but the latter career researchers believe that 85% of them were doing a great job mentoring. So there's a paradox between perceived quality of research and strong cultures. In the Wellcome Trust survey, what Wellcome Trust realized, and by the way, the survey was upwards of 4,500, 5,000 researchers. 75% were in the UK, but 25% were throughout Europe. Okay, so it gives you, it's a decent cross cut. But from the same survey, what they realized is that there were concerns expressed about the sustainability of current research cultures and the potential for the sustainability of the quality of research. There was an assumption that because we have good quality of research, that the cultures must be good, until they did the survey and they realized we potentially have toxic cultures that people do not want to remain in. And if you're thinking about UKRI or the Wellcome Trust, and you're thinking about your major funder, and you're putting a lot of resources into the sector, it's quite concerning. So what does this imply about the future of research quality? If, for example, the current early stage researchers aren't seeing sustainable career pathways? I mean, let's just call that a rhetorical question for now. But I will tell you, I was at a dinner at a university in Boston. I won't mention any names, and it was the department head for a biology department, and he had 4 of their PhD candidates there, and then a handful of people going up for tenure. And 2 of the 4 PhD candidates were decided not to pursue a career in research. And even more interestingly, they had no qualms about hiding that fact, okay? Yeah, they told their mentors, they told the department, I want to get my degree and I want to get out of higher ed. Like, that was staggering. And by the way, it was a nice dinner. Everybody was very cordial, but they had very, very defined attitudes about continuing in a culture of research in higher education. So as I mentioned a moment ago, there was a survey in Australia, the NHMRC, that 55% of junior researchers agreed that they were effectively mentored, although 82% of the senior researchers believed that they were effectively mentoring. Interestingly, but what I've been commenting on is actually taking root in the UK. For example, REF 2028 is actually placing 25% of the weighting on people and culture moving forward. And the CHIPS Act in the United States, you might have heard of it, but it directs the director of the NSF to start collecting data, gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, rank, tenure status. Like, if you looked at the list, you'd be like, wow. They are really assessing research culture. They're going to start assessing research culture in the United States. But what's interesting about that, when you look at Europe, Europe is way behind. When you think about the data that is collected, listen, we get to educational background and we're up at the 40–50%. Then you get to ethics, ethnic and cultural background, you're down to around 30%. We collect more information on our students than we do on our researchers. a dramatic amount more information on our students than we do on our researchers. So it's really, really hard to effectuate cultural change when we don't know anything about the people we're trying to create cultural change for. So, it's fantastic that Pure can manage a diverse range of activities, outputs, outcomes, and indicators on research. However, how do we align or overlay the important data on research culture that's attendant to our internal research communities or the individual researcher? Experience, like we're thinking about experience, faculty status, rank, terminal year to PhD, diversity, just factors that we can overlay to try and understand, like how are our research communities comprised? Are they diverse? Are they inclusive? By the way, what this is all implying, and if you read that welcome report, are they psychologically safe? Because that data would say no. So I believe it's not advancing. Oh, there we go, sorry. So I believe there's a poll. I believe this one's gonna be a layup. So which of the areas is most difficult data to collect? I have to learn how to do polls better, sorry. Fascinating. Wow, that's really, that I would have thought grants and projects, especially with this crowd. So that's, oh, my apologies, I'm reading it backwards. Yes. Evidence of impacts, that is really, really challenging. And yes, obviously between SciVal and Pure, we're advancing capabilities to do so, but impact occurs over time and very often can be anecdotal. So yeah, it's really interesting. But thank you for that. And we're gonna have another poll in a minute, so don't put your phones away. So the next question is, like, what data could better aid decision making when we think about it? So diversity data, comparative data on diversity between faculty and students, which is actually a really, really important one. There is a proven relationship between the faculty represents the diversity of your student body, your student body success rate tends to increase in a fairly large way. But data on reasons for leaving or staying, do we do exit surveys? Cultural audit, similar to the Welcome Trust survey, as to whether we maintain a psychologically safe environment. Do we bring in a third party and do an anonymous study in our research environments? One of our clients, University of Maryland in Baltimore County, they use NSF data on diversity by discipline, and they ensure that they have diverse applicant pools before making research or hiring decisions. And so they're really making efforts to make sure that their applicant pools and their researchers represent a diverse and inclusive community. And I'll reference later, we do have a thought leadership paper that I'll invite you to download, but faculty diversity in review and promotion processes. So we also have another client, RMIT, in Australia, and one of the areas is that they think about the entire staff life cycle, and allowing more accessible, customized, and equitable promotion processes for all of their staff, irrespective of academic discipline, because they can customize it to the discipline. Is it STEM? Is it not STEM? So just to give you an idea. So we'll do one more poll. Which of these areas is the most difficult data to collect? All right, most difficult data to collect. Interesting. Parental education, that's really interesting. Thank you. Or contract status? Hmm. Yep. Yep. It's hard to it's hard to create an inclusive environment if you're not cognizant of socioeconomic status and background. By the way, in that welcome survey, you want to hear something staggering? 60% of the respondents have witnessed bullying or discriminatory behavior. 58% feel that they have been bullied or discriminated against. Number one reason, gender. Number two reason, race and ethnicity. It's a really an interesting survey. So I'm going to try and apply a couple of principles here. I don't know how am I doing on time. Okay. So we did a sort of an innovation project at Elsevier, a couple of cross groups, and we decided to look into departmental benchmarking. But we wanted to use some what we would call cultural attributes and some bibliometric attributes. Okay. And so we compared 5 computer science departments: UC Berkeley, MIT, Stanford, University of Washington, and NYU. Okay. And what we did was we said, okay, how many faculty do they have? How many are tenure track and how many and research oriented? And how many are teaching? Okay. And then we said, okay, from a gender perspective, what you'll see is UC Berkeley and University of Washington tend to do pretty well, a little bit above the national average for computer science gender derivations in a department. What's also very interesting is those happen to be 2 public universities, MIT, Stanford, and NYU, private. Okay, so I don't know if that implies something about public universities versus private universities in the United States, but it sort of gives you an idea. We then said, let's look at the composition by terminal year to PhD. And what you'll notice is that University of Washington is comprised mostly of early or mid-career researchers. MIT, interestingly, is made up of latter career faculty, more so than the rest, all right? But are there implications to something like that? So, for example, we just heard that AI is in comp sci one of the fastest growing departments. It's probably one of the better funded departments or funded areas, domains in comp sci. But MIT is really lagging the pack. The rest of them are almost a quarter researchers in AI and ML. Okay, so interesting. And then we looked at publications and publications per faculty member. Now, we said University of Washington is comprised of all of them earliest or mid-career faculty members. But what's interesting is early career faculty members or researchers tend to have a slower publication throughput. Okay, it's just a ramification. But what's interesting when you take it one step further, University of Washington, when we think of citations and citations per publication, they're punching above their weight. They're punching above Berkeley. They're punching above MIT and NYU. So when we think about the attributes that make up our departments, like these are just a quick overlay about early, mid, against some bibliometrics. By the way, also interesting, I didn't bring the funding into this, but the largest funded departments, UC Berkeley and University of Washington, what was interesting, because UC Berkeley has a more senior set of faculty, they almost were tied for the amount of NSF funding they had. UC Berkeley had half the amount of awards, implying that UC Berkeley has fewer awards for higher dollar amounts, but University of Washington, encouraging their earlier career faculty and mid-career faculty to go after awards, they had a lot of awards, but of lower dollar amounts. What's interesting is, what's that going to mean in 15 years? That's going to be an army of mid and latter career faculty who are probably really punching at high value awards. So I would argue MIT maybe didn't get that memo yet. So sort of coming back to ground here for a second. You know, at Elsevier, as you can see, these innovation projects that we're doing, we think a lot about this and holistically. Beyond just outputs and knowledge created, to thinking about workload, teaching, research, and service, curriculum development, student outcomes, reputation, composition, resultantly leading to impact. which can include, by the way, alumni impact, alternative academic pathway impact. Like, where do our PhDs go? How are they changing the world? But as you can see, the human capital side, data and internal funding piece resides with you and the institutions. And only your organizations can really determine how you access this data to create more diverse, inclusive, equitable, and psychologically safe environments, sustaining top research quality. Because that's really, at the end of the day, what we're pursuing. Sustainability and increasing research quality. So we have a white paper, Faculty Diversity and Review and Promotion. I invite you to download it. And I thank you very much.
Thanks very much. That was a great talk and very insightful. And it sort of reminded me many years ago, I had the opportunity of, doesn't sound like this, but yeah, I had the opportunity many years ago of any time faculty or academics were leaving, they actually sent before the higher human resource department actually processed it, they sent it to me in the research office so I could do some analysis to understand what the impact was going to be on the community when they left. To sort of, to your point,
yeah.
that, oh, hang on, a serious professor's leaving, this whole network could now crumble and a piece of research could break down. And to do that, it's not simple to do those sort of things. But yeah, any questions? Many. We'll start here.
Thanks. Really great talk. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
This is an extremely challenging area, and you mentioned Ref 2028, and currently Research England are out for consultation on developing metrics to indicate research culture. And you had a slide there showing, you know, how much information on various measurements like age, ethnicity,
Right.
Sexual orientation, that kind of thing. The big challenge is that we can't guarantee that we can collect a full set of those types of data where people have the option of not providing the data.
Right.
So that makes it extremely challenging.
It's a cultural issue, by the way, because
Oh, yeah.
one of our other technologies facilitates the applying for an academic position. Remember, academic evaluation also happens when you're being hired. And in our technology, we have an EEO form. We actually get 99% of applicants filling out the EEO form.
Right. Wow.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. I'll hand over to someone else because I'm.
No, but it's a really good point. Is it possible? And the answer is in it's cultural, but in many regards, I think we're finding that it's going to become required.
Question down the back.
Thank you, Andrew.
It's working.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a fascinating presentation and very, very interactive audience poll. I think Koen must have read my mind. My question was, do you have any data about the attrition rate of the early career researchers and faculty amongst these peer institutions?
I actually do not, because we haven't looked it up yet. But it's something that we're going to get pretty proactive. I mean, the Great Resignation, we've seen a lot. And as a matter of fact, because we have faculty hiring technology and faculty applying technology, I can tell you faculty applications, because we probably facilitate about over 50% of all North American full-time faculty positions that are applied in North America. And we'll be bringing this into Europe and the UK starting next year. But what's interesting is applications are up in a pretty meaningful way. So we're starting to hire again, but we're filling a lot of spots that we've lost.
So from my experience, what I have seen is the early career faculty, they tend to be more mobile, you know, and within the academia and outside. So
Right.
you know, so whereas the later stage they tend to stick for. So it's great that you have this potential pipeline. You know, you're looking at them, but then what is the retention rate for the actual?
By the way,
next step?
two interesting things about the data that's up there. One, University of Washington has a policy of not hiring laterals. They only hire exiting PhDs. There might be an exception every once in a while, but they have a policy of only hiring new PhDs. And UC Berkeley, 10 years and 4 years. Okay, So typically you get full professorship in 4 years. So when you look at the mid-career, latter career, you'll see UC Berkeley, like they have a lot of full professors, but they're actually mid-career and could even be earlier career.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Yep.
Thank you. I wondered what you thought about job security. For a lot of ECRs are employed on short-term or fixed-term contracts, and that plays into the culture and the attitude. If they don't feel they have job security in research, why would they stay there? And that's not a university issue, that's a sector issue. So I wonder how much of that comes through in the reports and in the qualitative information that sits alongside those metrics.
That's a really good point, because especially in the UK, a lot of early career faculty are in non-guaranteed funding roles. And so the UK that wants to tackle the problem systemically, that's something they're going to have to change. And I think they know that. That's a great point.
Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
It certainly
Like I said, I'm buying
got
tonight.
people thinking. So thank you, Andrew.